Annette, one of my favorite movie musicals of the past year. Guys, welcome back. Make sure to like, sub, and comment, hit that notification bell. And today we're talking about Annette. Let's get into it. So I'm going to be doing an Annette analysis video in which I'm going to be going over my interpretation and thoughts. Obviously, this movie is super weird. It's dark. It's methodical, and it's a lot of weird visuals, and there's a lot of theories, and I was gonna go over some of those theories, but then I decided to stick with my interpretation of the film and kind of hopefully giving a different perspective and context into this very weird and confusing film. So I'm gonna say this right off the bat. Henry McHenry is a narcissist. Obviously, I'm not trying to self-diagnose as a fictional character, but I am gonna self-diagnose a fictional character, so deal with it. So one of the first things of narcissism is a grandiose sense of self-importance. Now, the definition for this first phase is narcissists believe they are unique or special and can only be understood by other special people. What's more, they are too good for anything average or ordinary. They only want to associate and be associated with other high-status people, places, and things. This relates to Henry in terms of his comedy shows. Many viewers, in terms of people who have seen the film, have stated and said that his shows were not funny at all and didn't get what the movie was going for. Now, some people have said this can refer to Bo Burnham, Chris Rock, and kind of shock comedy, offensive, on the border, and stuff like that. That Henry believes that what he's doing is very highbrow and only meant for the smartest of people. That would explain his disinterest and nonchalant attitude whenever he performs. It's not that he's sad or he doesn't care about his craft. In fact, it's quite the opposite. He does care so much, but feels he has to talk down to these commoners and dumb it down to their level. He feels superior to them in every way, like he is forced to share his genius, which isn't genius at all or even remotely funny, with lower-class people instead of those he deems unique and would get and celebrate him all the time. Nothing he does is funny or good, but rather shock value and some may say misogynistic. But due to his narcissism, he can't see that and refuses to believe that. So again, I'm kind of correlating certain things that Henry says and does with the narcissism thing, and you'll see clips, and I will actually lead into some of those clips so you can kind of get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. The next one is lives in a fantasy world that supports their delusions of grandeur. While Henry has no major fantasies, he does believe he is a true artiste, and when he shows stop happening after the incident, which is used to laugh, and after his comedy does not land with the Los Angeles crowd, he starts to feel angry. Anything that threatens to burst this fantasy bubble, the fantasy bubble, is met with extreme defensiveness and even rage. The audience, who are not his cult fan base, reacts in a negative way to his shows. He starts to break down and then goes into a full-blown rage song. They burst his bubble. They spin self-glorifying fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, attractiveness, and ideal love that makes him feel special and in control. He's not brilliant, and being told that sends him down a spiral. And he needs constant praise and admiration. Henry does seem to have a full ego, and if Anna's doing well and he's not, it upsets him. And this could not be clearer in certain clips in the movie where he kind of is looking at Anne, and we don't really know what kind of emotion he's trying to elicit. I think it's jealousy and rage that she's doing well, and he is not doing as well, and he's ultimately jealous and wants all the spotlight on him, which is what a classic narcissist wants. He takes away Anne and baby Annette on a boat, and has a growing resentment towards Anne, which is seen as betrayal, and that festers in Henry. The darkness, messed upness that is Henry, and that he hides, comes out when he starts drinking and giving into his darker impulses. His narcissism finally shows and comes out on all cylinders. And now, I don't think Henry's sociopathic or a psychopath, but I think he has a lot of inner demons and probably a traumatic childhood, and maybe he is an incel or misogynistic or has something against women or just people succeeding in general, and he definitely has this darker side to him that comes out through the alcoholism and the one core thing, which was him failing at the comedy show, that sends him down the spiral, and he has always been tempted to look into the abyss, and now that he has, he cannot escape it. And I think the alcohol was the key to opening up the abyss and fully looking at it. So the next thing about narcissists is it's all about what the admirer can do for the narcissist, never the other way around. And this perfectly summarizes Henry and Anne's relationship. Because again, Henry always expects Anne to come with him to support him. We never see Henry support Anne and help her out, and it seems like a very one-sided relationship, and some may say Henry is misogynistic, and I wouldn't disagree. So the next point is they also expect the people around them to automatically comply with them for every wish and whim. That is their only value. If you don't anticipate and meet their every need, then you're useless. And if you have the nerve to defy their will, or selfishly ask for something in return, prepare yourself for aggression, outrage, or in Henry's case, murder. When Anne refuses to dance with Henry and talks about her voice and how she's afraid of losing it, Henry switches to a very aggressive stance. He then says, "There's so little I could do," which could mean there's so little handling his disorder now that he's looked into the abyss and it's out of control. Also, when the accompanist defies Henry, he goes crazy and aggressive. And this perfectly correlates with, if you defy them, they will return with outrage and potential violence, or murder in this case. So the next thing is exploit others without guilt or shame. In many ways, they view the people in their lives as objects. They're to serve their needs. As a consequence, they don't think twice about taking advantage of others to achieve their own ends. This could not be more perfectly represented than in Annette being a literal doll and an object Henry sees and uses for his own needs. Those needs are being the center of attention, being seen as superior, and a genius. It's a literal, visual representation of narcissism. One scene sees Henry studying Annette and seeing how he can use her. Also, the weird gorilla is another visual representation of Henry needing full control, and this correlates back to narcissists needing full control and wanting to be in charge of everything and not wanting to have the spotlight taken away from them. The movie uses weird and unsettling imagery to convey disorders, the human brain, and the non-visual, if that makes sense. This is the next point of narcissistic behavior. The only thing they understand is their own needs, and that is Henry, because Henry's only really understands his own needs and desires, not anyone else's. He used their physical body to demean, intimidate, or bully others. And the movie gives us misdirects, especially in the beginning when it looks like Henry's trying to choke Annette, but really he's not. I think the point of these misdirects is to foreshadow the true darkness in Henry, once again using the visual medium to convey ideas that aren't physical. And going back to the demeaning part, we obviously see that when Henry feels threatened, he uses physical violence to intimidate and bully others. Movies like this convey simple and big ideas through a more complicated, and some may say convoluted way, but it's meant to make you dive further into these for the answers more, and present it in a more imaginative, exciting way. Stare into the Abyss is from the quote by Nietzsche. I actually don't know how to pronounce his name, but that's who the guy is. "He who fights with monsters should be careful, lest he thereby become a monster. And if thou gaze long into an abyss, the abyss will also gaze into thee." It means if you contemplate evil too much, you will become evil yourself. Now this can apply to Henry, and it makes sense why he tells Anne to not look into the abyss, and him having empathy for those consumed by the abyss. As human beings, every one of us has a dark side. We all have something inside us that has the potential to be evil. To prevent it from coming to the surface and causing harm to others, we need to acknowledge that it exists. Without Henry looking into it, he might have dug into those darker thoughts and done something even worse than murder over time. Annette is also free of him, which is the best thing for her. And by seeing it and going into the most extreme, Henry now understands what he's done and feels empathy, which he's not been able to do. He needed to do those things so he didn't become even worse, and can now become a better person and one who acknowledges his demons and can confront them instead of hiding them. This literally could have been a Black Mirror episode. The ending is quite dark, and this is why it could have been a Black Mirror episode. It's because it's a very dark ending. Ultimately a tale of child stardom and how toxic and dark it can be. How Hollywood parents can be the real cause of these children's downfalls. A cautionary tale of what not to do, and the consequences, albeit very far out, one can face. But it is funny it's called Sympathy for the Abyss, and rejects her dad and mom and says you're all alone. She has every right to, and should, not necessarily forgive Henry and redeem him and make him feel like he's not responsible for anything that he's done, because he has done terrible things. But Henry's not making excuses, but wants Anne to hear where he's coming from. He says how he tried so hard to fight it off, looking into the abyss, to look into his impulses and the true demons inside him. Him being relieved about looking into the abyss is something we'd all say. Being able to give into our darkness, to do things we know is wrong. It's intriguing, it's luring. It's the snake in the story of Adam and Eve, where, you wanted to do the bad thing, or that kind of side of you that, if we're getting religious, comes from the devil. But we've all been there. He's a messed up person. Him saying imagination is so strong and reason is weak. How when you're fully in the abyss, reason becomes faint and weak, and the imagination, with no logical reason other than going off of emotion, takes over. Henry's trying to convey that sometimes humans can't help giving into the darker side and looking into the abyss that we are all tempted with. He wants her to know how he tried to fight it off and it got the better of him, but now that he did, he sees his flaws and who he was and is now changed because of it. He has empathy and regret for what he did. He had to look into the dark to prevent even worse things from happening. This is what makes Annette a tragedy, as someone has to have some form of a downfall or bad thing happen in order to learn a valid but important hard lesson about life and society and human beings. We can feel sympathy for someone and understand them, but not say they are excused or forgive them. Annette says forget you both or forgive you both, but the question is never answered. And why should it? Life is messy and complicated, and not black and white as Twitter would have you believe. Annette instead says to be strong. Annette instead says, I have to be strong, which could mean she won't decide, or she will move on and use this as a lesson in a defining moment in her life that will make her into the person she will become, which is better than her mom and dad. She can't seem to answer her own question, as it's a dilemma that can't be solved in a pretty bow. To forgive someone for doing terrible things is a hard thing to do, but not impossible, and often a long and hard journey. To forget and not forgive is the easy way out, and possibly less painful. It can lead to bottled up resentment and a forming of a new abyss. Finding peace in forgiveness might be easier than labeling, canceling, and hating on. Yet, neither is satisfactory, but moving on and using the pain to inform and mold you. While Henry says to not look into the abyss, and that is true for him, it might be needed for others. He pleads for not to, and this might be a way of asking her to forgive and feel sympathy for him, as doing the opposite could lead to a new abyss. It could also mean asking her to simply not follow his example and be a better person. So that was basically my analysis of the character of Henry McHenry and my overall thoughts on the movie and what all these different things meant. There's also a ton of other great Annette video essays that goes into what the different colors mean, and there's so many theories and essays you could do on this movie. It's an amazing film. Go and watch it on Amazon Prime. It's my favorite movie musical probably of all time and one of my favorite films of this year. I'll see you guys in the next video. Like, sub, and comment, and go see Annette.